by Wits Business School's Masters in Management in the field of strategic marketing, program. And at this moment in time, please allow me to just make some introductions of our guests this afternoon, starting with the Senior Lecturer and Director of the Master of Management in the field of strategic marketing at Wits Business School. Her name is Dr. Yvonne Sayini, and she joined the business school in 2006 and is a marketer, is the marketing lecturer in PDM, PDBA, MBA, and the MMSM and MAP programs, with a core focus covering on consumer behavior, principles of marketing and marketing management. And Yvonne has also lectured at Monash University and the University of Cape Town, as well as the BA and MBA, also has an MBA and MBA, BA, MBA, and PhD achievements. And Yvonne also holds certification in e-marketing offered from the University New Zealand Direct Marketing Association and Direct Marketing Association of South Africa. Dr. Yvonne, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Much appreciate your time. And let me also introduce one of our guests this afternoon, Dr. Siphiwe Dlamini, Senior Lecturer and Head of Marketing in the School of Management Studies, University of Cape Town. Dr. Dlamini has a PhD in Business Science, specializing in marketing from Wits University. He's a Senior Lecturer and Head of Marketing Department in the School of Management Studies, University of Cape Town. And he's also a Master of Management in the field of Strategic Marketing graduate from Wits Business School, where he currently teaches Applied Services Marketing also. Dr. Siphiwe, good afternoon and welcome.
Afternoon. Hi, Lawrence. Thanks for having me. Look forward to an interesting engagement.
Only a pleasure. Look forward to your insights. Really appreciate it. Sydney Mbele is Chief Executive Brand at Sanlam Group. Sydney Mbele is a chartered marketer with a proven track record in building brands and markets. His experience stretches the financial services, banking, insurance, and investments, FMCGs and telecoms. He has worked in marketing, communications, and sales and corporate affairs, and led major brands for organizations that include the likes of Unilever, SAB Miller, Nedbank, Liberty, and Celsey. And as indicated, he's currently the Chief Executive for Brand at Sanlam Group and a member of the Group Exco, Chairman and Board of the Marketing Association of South Africa. Sid is also the co-founder and chairman of Mentor a Boy, Child, a non-profit organization focusing on helping young boys become better men from society. Sydney, I hope that you will make us better and more enlightened as marketers this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thanks for having me, and great to be joining this conversation and looking forward to the chat with the fellow panelists.
Only a pleasure and welcome. Only a pleasure. Bakani Taisi is the Senior Marketing Manager at Tiger Brands. Bakani has been in FMCG marketing for 13 years, and most of his career was spent in Unilever, where he was recruited from UCT. He recently joined Tiger Brands, kicking to join in the culinary world as the Senior Marketing Manager looking after the condiments. Over his marketing career, he's been blessed to be a brand custodian of South African household brands. Historic legacies, all gold, Crosswell and Blackwell, Vaseline, Mrs. Bowles, Almost Seth, Rama Stock, Dove, Shield. Bakani, you've absolutely, been in our houses and in our faces for a very long time, because as a shopper marketing specialist, you've worked in formal and informal retailers in SA, for Spar, Walmart, Massmart, wholesalers and spazers. And all these things have made an effect in our daily life. And I know that Bakani is passionate about African talent in seeing an economically empowered future for the continent. He believes brands and technologies can be powerful contributors to this cause. Bakani, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Looking forward to this, and also looking forward to learn from our panelists and everyone else.
Absolutely. You've been in our, I was thinking to myself, that means all those condiments that you've been, are placed in our houses, all over our houses, you've literally been influencing us. You're an influencer, I must imagine now.
Yeah, you can imagine how my family treasures all the samples that I bring home.
Absolutely, I imagine so. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for those that are joining us at Wits Business School this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are tweeting WBS talks, WBS events, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's just keep the conversation going online, and later on, for those that can, you'll be able to access this conversation. You'll be able to access this conversation on our different online platforms later on. But thank you very much for joining us. We absolutely appreciate it, even as we have our conversations this afternoon. Dr. Saini, maybe let's start off where you are. Let's talk to you first. Let's take a trip a little bit about marketing, you know, and sometimes we make the assumption that everyone in the room understands marketing. And so many things have happened. Some people would want to tell you advertising and marketing are not the same thing. Marketing and digital marketing are not the same thing. Doc, what is marketing? Perhaps let's hear that from you, Dr. Yvonne Saini. What is marketing, and how has it transitioned from the days one perhaps Jesus was standing on a boat and shouting and trying to talk to over 2,000 people to convert and get his message across, till today where I can send a tweet on Facebook. How is marketing translated, and what exactly is marketing? Let's start there, Dr. Yvonne Saini, and Dr. Simpio, you then follow after that.
Okay, thank you very much for everybody who has come. This is just one of the beginning of the conversations that we're going to be having. It's good that people in the industry, in academia, we meet, you know, at least to be able to discuss a few issues. So I've got a presentation. If Jeten can put it up, we'll start from there. This is just to state the context of the conversation that we're going to have. Next slide. I just want to look at just the basic principles of marketing. I think for all of us, we know that for any organization, the objective of any organization is to create value or to make value for all the stakeholders. Of course, at the center is a customer. If the customer does not get value from what the company is offering, we know that the customer will go somewhere else, to go to the competitor. So that's just to start with. So for any organization, whether government or non-governmental, the basic objective is to create value for all stakeholders. So I just want to run briefly on the basic principles. The first one is that customers differ. Customers are different, they are never the same. And because of that, for any organization, we come up with our strategies, your segmentation, targeting, positioning, and of course your 7 Ps. Most of us, we know about the 4 Ps. Then the second aspect, the basic concept as well, is that all customers change. This is that customers over time, they're never the same. You could have targeted a certain target market, but you need to be able to understand those customers, they change over time for various reasons. Could be just the issue about age. When you are young and you are not married, you can stay in a small flat. But as you grow older, you have kids, then your needs actually differ. So that's when we end up having acquisition, expansion, and retention strategies, because then you are able to understand these customers, they do change over time. That's one of the basic principles in marketing. The third one is that our competitors do react. For most industries, you might not be the only provider of a specific product or service. And because of that, you need to be able to develop your brand strategies, your innovation strategies. You need to change the offerings, the products that you give on the market. And of course, the issue about relationship strategies, they come in there. Because competitors, they react. You're not the only one. And because of that, you need to be able to change your strategies over time. And of course, the last basic concept is that resources are limited. And I think for most of us in the marketing field, we know that when there's a recession, and we even saw when COVID-19 came in, most of the companies, where they go is cut the marketing budget. So resources are limited. So you need to come up with strategies of how you're going to survive and do trade-offs because of the limited resources companies have. The next slide. So for tonight's or afternoon discussion, it's the issue of saying, how do you manage all these strategies in the environment where we are now, with all the different technologies that have come up with? The issue is that with all the basic concepts that I've covered, a technology has come in. How does that influence, let's say, your customers? With the new technologies that have come in, how are customers being influenced in the way they make their decisions? And also, how do marketers leverage with the new technologies that are available? And not only that, how do marketers enhance the use of these technologies to create more value for the customers? We have the internet, of course, changed almost how marketers do their work. And of course, we now have digital marketing. That is how we use these technologies to achieve our objectives. We now have, it's almost all the time, we have new technologies coming in. You have your robots, you have drones, marketers, how are we using drones to deliver products to our customers? We have now artificial intelligence. That's a buzzword we all know, the chat boxes, the voice recognition. You have Alexa, Siri on Apple, facial recognition. How are we using all this to enhance value, not only for the customers, also for the companies in general? So our discussion this evening, we're looking at how can we use technologies to actually create value for the companies and also for the organizations out there. The Internet of Things technologies, how are you using that with the understanding now that a lot of these gadgets can be connected? How can marketers use that? The next slide. And what we're seeing is that with all these technologies that are coming in, marketers now, you have a lot of information from the different touch points. Somebody will go on Facebook, they'll see an advert there, then they go to the website of the company. All those different touch points customers are going through. How do you use this information now? That's where now we are sitting in a situation where, as marketers, we have so much information on customers. What are we doing with that information? How are we using it to get insights so that we can develop all these various strategies to enhance the value to the customers? So that's where your big data comes in, marketing analytics comes in. So marketers have to learn of how to use this information to be able to come up with strategies that will enhance the customers and keep the customers to retain those customers. The next slide. Then the other context we need to look at here in South Africa is the digital divide. Knowing that we have I think South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient between the rich and the poor. And for marketers in South Africa, the issue comes in. How are you going to develop strategies when you have such a digital divide in South Africa? For some of us, maybe it's been many years since we used the old cell phones. We assume everybody has got a touch cell phone, but that's not true. Even when you look at internet penetration, it's still just above 50%. There's a good number of South Africans who don't have access to the internet. So how do you use these technologies, or how do we innovate technologies to be able to reach the people who do not have access to some of these modern technologies? And one of the things we also find is that we have very limited studies in South Africa in terms of how we can use technology in South Africa. Like one in terms of drones. How can we use drones like now with what is going on with COVID-19? People are not able to move around. They're not able to meet their friends, and then some of them are even scared to go shop and all that. Can we use these drones to be able to deliver products to our customers? So those are some of the things that we need to discuss this afternoon and have the conversation. How can we use technology to enhance our customer experience, to create value for customers, and also to create value for the companies? I think I'll end here. So this is just the context of our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saini, Dr. Yvonne Saini, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for those insights and laying the foundation for our discussion this afternoon. I'm sure we're going to touch on all these different elements that you've spoken about. Dr. Kamini, take us through, as I was saying earlier on, take us through the transition of marketing, perhaps from as I was saying, from the earliest of days that it's been to now that we're leveraging on in the digital age. What are some of the transitions that marketing has gone through, perhaps in your own reading?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, Lawrence, let me start with a very nice and interesting quick story, right? Yeah. So I remember 2 years ago, I was teaching right there at Wits Business School an MBA class. So I'm teaching marketing in a connected world. And then someone in the class actually said marketing to them is literally just giving out pens and t-shirts. And that obviously gave me a fright, because I'm thinking that's not what we are about as marketers. But then that raised an interesting question, because MBA students are not marketers, right? So our key problem starts in the workplace, right? Because remember that we don't necessarily have to focus our marketing efforts on the end users, because marketing also has to happen inside the organization, right? Because the moment we start talking about what we value and what we're trying to promise our consumers, when inside organizations, the same employees don't believe in the vision and the promises that you're telling consumers in the outside, that tells us a different conversation, that your marketing also must be internal instead of looking forward in terms of the external consumers. So this is important for us in terms of how we engage marketing as a stakeholder approach, right? But the stakeholder approach gives us that insight that you think inside, but also you function outside. Now, when you think about the end user, right, it's important to also provide context, right? As Dr. Saini said, consumers are different, they're diverse, but now we need to think on the spectrum of how we market, right? So think about this in numbers. So we know that there's probably 36 million consumers in South Africa who earn less than 8,000. 18 million of those earn less than 3,500 a month, right? So that tells us something about the consumers that we're speaking about. On the extreme end, we have consumers who earn 40 plus, right? So you're looking at about 3 million consumers who earn 40,000 Rand per month as an income. So we have two extremes of consumers that we're always speaking about in the context of marketing, which is very important, right? Because numbers matter to us as marketers, because we need to know who are we marketing to and how effective can our marketing be. And then when you look at the actual buying and spending power comes from the middle of that spectrum. So people will be earning 8,000 to 22,000 a month. Those are the middle consumers who have the biggest spending power. So that tells us something. So we assume that as marketers that, the rich are people who earn a lot of money, but actually the rich are people who are probably earning 29,000 as an income on an average. So that tells us a lot of things around how we market and what marketing is all about. And then Dr. Saidi touched on an important thing in terms of the digital divide, right? Because now you start interrogating what does that actually mean, right? Now we think about cell phone as a measure of access, right? Because we need to be accessible to consumers. And you look at cell phones now and you look at, okay, we know that 97% of consumers have cell phones. And Dr. Saini was correct in saying, but not all of them have access to internet. Rightfully so, only 67% of consumers have access to the internet, right? But then when you break it down, that 67%, then it starts telling us further information that within that 67% of consumers, 81% actually have, access to social media. So we start talking about social media as a channel that's important, right? And also know 91% of those consumers have access to instant messaging. We talk about the WhatsApps. But when you further interrogate that, you know that only 63% of consumers have search capabilities in understanding how to search for information. So all of it speaks about internet connectivity and penetration, but it speaks importantly about access. So market is always understanding how do we better serve our consumers, and do we actually know who we're speaking to? Because it's an important conversation to be having today in this digital context. Now, this brings us closely in terms of how we understand the context of marketing. And when you look at where marketing was some 20 years ago, it's always been about the product, right? The product was at the center of what we do. And gradually, all as marketers started speaking about customer centricity, which is an important tool in understanding that, yes, the customer is at the center of what we do. But now we understand that consumers are more empowered now because of this technology that we speak about. So the empowerment of the consumers also forces us as marketers to be more forward-thinking and thinking more strategically about our consumers, right? Because the biggest mistake we make is that we assume that our customers from yesterday are going to be available tomorrow. That's not the case anymore, right? Because our customers are always aware in terms of what they want and what they need from organizations in terms of how we should be thinking about those key things. So I like to look at marketing now in this Internet of Things as four important things, right? So Dr. Saini spoke about the 7 Ps. So now I introduce what we call marketing 4.0. So you look at the 4 I's of marketing, right? So the 4 I's of marketing for us looks at, we understand marketing as an identity, right? Because we speak about understanding perception and the mindset of the consumers, right? Because consumers have expectations in terms of what we're able to deliver. And importantly, that leads us to the second I, which is about the image. Because we care about the image, because we are protecting that image and we're creating something for consumers to understand why we are in business and what value we bring to the table. And then secondly, because of where we are in terms of this digital divide, we need to be speaking about the integrity, right? It's the credibility of brands. Very important, right? Because credibility tells us that you are able to deliver on your promises. And now with customers being empowered, they're keeping us more accountable in terms of delivering on service, right? Because they no longer can accept us not delivering the best service, right? And not taking care of their needs, which is an important thing. And lastly, we now in this realm of the Internet of Things, it's all about interactions, right? So when we talk about interactions, we're talking about how do we start? Remember, customers are not in the boardroom. So we make decisions for people who are not in the boardroom and who are not there when we talk about strategy. So the interaction for us speaks about why it's important that customers are at the center of product development. In that sense, to talk about how do we co-create value, right? We always speak about we are delivering value, but how do we co-create value with our customers, which is an important conversation. And that speaks to collaboration and partnership so they understand what value they bring to the table. So Lawrence, I want to stop there and then so we also unpack and interrogate this further.
Absolutely, Dr. Tlemini, absolutely appreciate the insights. And we're going to come back to the issue of the digital divide at some point, because perhaps while we're talking about marketing in the digital age, maybe there are some people who are not even in the digital age as far as they're concerned. That maybe there's some people that actually are still, for us to get our services to them and our goods to them, we still need to put them in a mall. And unfortunately, that mall has been burnt down, perhaps. And those are some of the conversations that marketers have got to be thinking about, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got questions, by the way, if you've got any questions, please use our chat bot. Please use our chat function and just hold the questions inside there. And at 5 o'clock exactly, I'm hoping that we will have done with our conversation, and then we will start having, we'll go through a question and answer session. So please, if you have any questions for any of our guests, do get ready. At 5 o'clock, we'll then start having a Q&A. If you would like to, at this moment, so that you don't forget your question, you can already put it in the chat function. Bakani, are we seeing marketing changing, or are we seeing the environment and the tools rather changing? And I'd love to just hear your thoughts as someone who's worked in the FMCG space for quite a long time. Is marketing changing itself, or essentially what we have is just a change of tools and functions, perhaps?
I think that's a good question following on from how we started, and I'd like to just maybe start there, then I'll work myself back into just my thoughts around the question you asked. So I think to what the doctor said around understanding context, it's really important for marketing as well. So I think at the core, it's important that we understand that marketing should mirror the society that it's trying to serve. At the end of the day, it does not exist in a vacuum and does not exist prior to that, because we are at the service of our consumers. So over the ages, marketing has been a reflection of where society has been. So if we take it far back to even, I think probably from a global point of view, outside of this current pandemic, the last global influence around brands and marketing was the World War II, where we saw the beginning and the growth of some of the more mainstream brands that we see today. And I think that since then, we've seen an evolution of marketing as society has also progressed since then. So from the baby boomers, we know around then, that was where a lot of people experienced the war. So that's a common experience that they have from that perspective. We start to evolve to going into Gen X, where we start speaking to people who really understood what globalization was about, this mass growth of entertainment and lifestyle from a world point of view, then coming closer to a technology age where the internet comes in, to the next generation, where we start to see the inception of really, social media and the role and the influence that is played. And then to where we are today, really, where we start to see what you would argue is a more seamless approach to all these things. As these things have evolved, there's been certain sub-disciplines that have evolved with marketing. So I think it's important to recognize why those exist, because they can be easily catchphrases, but it's important to understand what has driven the introduction of those. So if we go back, then you start to see that, from that initial change, we saw the rise of what we call probably shopper marketing. And that was within the globalization era, where it's more about the focus on shopper-based insights that are going to drive how we build our marketing plans. From there, we start to see the introduction of technology, and we can break that down into different influences. But for now, we'll just call it under the digital marketing banner. But with that, also, we're starting to see the next wave of evolution, where there's influencer-based marketing, which acknowledges that the consumer has now got a bigger say, but also purpose-driven and ethical marketing, which is now placing brands in a position where they have to be more responsible beyond the top and bottom line. And I think with recognizing that, then getting back to your question in terms of how has marketing changed, or has it been the environment or the tools? It's really the environment, and then marketing follows suit. The tools then have to keep up to where society is for us to really understand this really clearly. And I think it's important that the consumer will always be at the heart of what we do as marketers. So marketing in terms of principles will always remain the same. However, the way we are able to understand and learn the values, or should I say the changing values, attitudes and lifestyles of the people we serve becomes important as we do so. So therefore, then marketing and the tools should change in accordance to that. And therefore, just to close off, I think on that question, I think the perception that marketing is stagnant is not a point of view that I buy into. I think that it's usually always dynamic, and it's important that we always understand, as society changes, what should we be learning as that change happens.
Well, thanks so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate the thoughts and sharing those. You've said one thing for me, which you've said was marketing essentially is not necessarily changing, but at the same time, it's got to catch up with the times in one way or another. But the fundamentals have remained the same. Sydney, will those be your thoughts? Perhaps I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in terms of what the colleagues have shared here. And then also perhaps, Sydney, what are some of the tools that have become prominent now that we're living in the digital age? What are some of the tools that you think every marketer should be knowing how to use perhaps at this point?
Yeah, look, I mean, well, good afternoon to everyone, and once again, thank you for having me. I mean, I think I would definitely align with what Bakani has just said. As you were asking Dr. Kubai, I think, Kabai, apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
You can Saini, don't worry, Dr. Saini.
Thank you for the correction. I was reflecting on the very basic question that you asked. What is marketing? And I thought you might ask me that question too. And I haven't read a marketing textbook in a very long time. So I started jotting for myself here, some notes on what I thought marketing was. Now that I've got, so much experience, what would I say to people if they ask me the question, what is marketing? And here's what I jotted down, and you will see how it connects to the question that you've just asked. I said it's a blended scientific and creative process to build and to orchestrate brands to meet conscious and unconscious customer needs. Now, I didn't mention digital there. I just talked about a process. It's a very scientific process. It's part art, part science. It has to be value accretive because customers have to connect, whatever you churn out at the end has to be relevant and resonate. It has to resonate with customers. Absolutely. But it's a process. It's a process to orchestrate. And we build brands, and those brands have to meet that particular need or opportunity, that customers might have. So it has to be value accretive. Now, the world today and the world 15 years ago has changed considerably, but I could easily have given you exactly the same definition. Digital technology, the accelerated pace of change that we've seen, right, over the last while, has forced us to look at marketing differently. And it doesn't mean that everything has changed about marketing. You know, the traditional channels still exist. We still watch TV. How we use TV maybe, you know, may be different than we did before, but we still use TV. But we now have an avenue to be able to narrow the odds of an error, because we know that traditional marketing, you know, did not have as much reliable data. There were lots of discrepancies in the data, and digital marketing allows us to be able to be a bit more precise. And that's why I call it in my business at Sanlam, to my team, I call it precision marketing, because it allows us to track at every point on the customer journey, you know, who we need to talk to at what point and what's appropriate at that point. You know, in the past, we didn't have a single view of the customer. Through digital marketing, we're able to do that and do that effectively. It did not effectively recognize the best time to connect with potential customers. Now we know exactly at what point I can talk to you. So the creation of these lookalike audiences, we were not able to do before. This notion of information asymmetry using first-party data and third-party data through the orchestration process that I've just described allows us to be a bit more precise in terms of talking to customers. So we are just living in a world that's evolving, and we have to adapt to be able to meet this world that's changed. And that's why you need people who can understand the intersection of technology, understand the intersection of, you know, the customer journey mapping, understand the integration experience. You know, at what point do I use radio, TV, and social media? What point in social media do I use certain tactics versus others? You know, that's the scientific process. And the reason why in that class that you were describing, Dr. Dlamini, someone said, you know, marketing is about, I don't know, giving away pens. And the reason why in a lot of boardrooms you have, you know, a very diluted credibility of the marketing function is our inability as marketers to be able to justify a reason for existence and be able to use science as a way to demonstrate cause and effect. And, you know, technology has enabled us. And you ask me what tools, there is a plethora of tools that are now available across, you know, the value chain of marketing. And I mean, I could spend weeks and weeks as I try to talk about, you know, what do you use in terms of listening to the sentiment in social media. Again, there's many tools that we can use here. What is important is for you to be able to choose what's appropriate. And again, how you choose that is the science, right? What are the business objectives? What are the brand's objectives? What are you trying to achieve? And therefore, what do you think is fit for purpose at that point in time?
Yeah. Sidi, great thoughts there. Great thoughts there. I'm just going to tap into your thinking while I'm still with you. Let's talk big data. Let's talk big data. One of the technologies that has affected us a lot is big data, and it's helped us at the same time, but at the same time, it's needed us to change our thinking a lot, hasn't it? This issue of big data, because we're finding that in the boardroom we are now able to, with the usage of big data, be more scientific than we have been artistic in our approach to marketing. Because back in the days we were largely social, you know, we're largely art more than science. Is big data perhaps allowing us that opportunity to be more scientific?
Absolutely. I mean, because businesses are calling for us to be demonstrating that we are adding value, right? And that we can justify the resources that we spend in the market as appropriate in fulfilling the business objectives. And one of the things that we are not well known for, unfortunately, in my discipline of marketing, is our analytical ability. And I'm just generalizing here. And as we move forward and embrace this
traditionally, apparently, we didn't do well with maths, and so that's why we chose marketing. Apparently, you know, that used to be the mantra, didn't?
Yeah, look, I mean, that may not necessarily be the only reason. but we are not very fair with numbers. Right? So
yeah.
big data allows us to tap into this notion of attribution-based allocation, right?
Okay.
Because you've got to attribute what
Yeah.
you do. And I use the term cause and effect. Why am I doing this versus that? Right? It's, you know, in the world of digital social media, there's aspects of content management, you know, there's aspects of search optimization, et cetera, et cetera. How do it's become very rigorous, you know, and therefore, you know, big data allows us to be able to actually amplify our credibility. Big data allows us to be able to not only be scientific in achieving the business objectives, but people who are finance directors, people who are CEOs will respect us more because we will be able to talk their language.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the world's most respected minds in marketing once said, half of advertising is wasted. The problem is you don't know which one. And I think those days are gone. And I understand they said it over 50 years ago, but that understanding is gone. You are now required to provide evidence for what you're spending money for and what you're doing with that money. Maybe Bakani, just to tap into here, what's the shift in terms of the skill set for a career for the modern marketer in the digital age? What will be the new kind of skills that a marketer or a marketer in the digital age would need in light of all these things, you know, augmented reality, big data, and all these other technologies that are now cropping up? Is the traditional marketer still relevant, or what skills would they need to adjust to be relevant to these changes of our times?
Just to pick up from what Sydney just mentioned now, which is quite important because I use a similar simplified equation to really understand marketing, which is this aspect of logic, magic, and craft. I mean, the other thing you can talk about is it's science, it's art, it's rigor, right? Yeah. I think it's important to understand those three things about marketing because I'll use the iceberg theory a little bit here in that, you know, 70% of what real marketers do is science and rigor. And what we get to see, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately in this context because the perception is really based on what people see, but not necessarily what led us to that point in time and what happens after that as well. And I think that it's a point in time thing. That's what people really get attracted to, and that's what people really understand. But what's beneath the iceberg is what people are really missing. And I think that in this digital age, it's important to understand that this has allowed us to really, it's been almost like a drug to the system in terms of the way we do things, right? So when we go back to what Dr. Saini was saying earlier around the fact that when we really talk about segmentation, targeting, positioning, and execution, there's things that you can really see what digital is going to really do for you across those. Yeah. However, at the end of the day, it's really about effectiveness and efficiency. That's the biggest contribution across that process that digital has provided. So therefore, it's important to understand then as a marketer who's trying to upskill for the future, what are the things that we need to look at? I think traditional will never go away, right? I think it's important that we understand that. Well, let me not say never, but I mean, it's around to stay for. Yeah,
the issue of the digital divide and all these things means it's going to take a hell lot longer before it's actually, completely out of the way.
Exactly. And I think that once we build this, what's important is that marketers still need to have a strong sense of how do we build strong insights that inform effective communication at the end of the day. That is always going to be the base of what we do. What digital really helps us do and what we should really look at is how is it allowing us to get stronger insights at the end of the day, stronger and actionable insights. It's not about just the aggregation of data. It's about what is the question that you're trying to answer. And really the skill set of a marketer should be about how do I get myself in a position that I'm asking the right questions? Regardless of how tools and things change around me, how am I asking the right questions around the people I'm serving? So at the core of a marketer, that should be something that you are curious, at least a quest in terms of capability and aptitude perspective. I think that it's important that we also learn the craft of things, how to do things better. Because one thing I was taught, so in my experience, I had the blessing to really learn from the more sales side of things as well. And I realized that when I was dealing with retailers and the customers, they don't really care about this stuff. What they want to see is effectiveness and performance at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's important that we learn how to support our ideas or the strategy with strong ideas, but ideas that can be executed. So craft is important as a marketer as well in terms of experience, in that it will help you drive that effectiveness and efficiency of what you've identified as an opportunity. I think that then in the digital scope, what becomes important is to learn the language. There is a language, you hear Sydney already throwing in some of the phrases as well that you need to learn. But ultimately, how is it going to serve you to answer those questions that you have come up with? The one caution though I will highlight is that, and I've seen already with the adoption is digital, is that people tend to think that it's an answer to a more dashboard approach to marketing, which is not the case. What is important is that it should still supplement what we do, but our closeness to the consumer should never be replaced by the tools that we have. And it's important that we don't see people as ones and zeros, and that there are people on the other side of these things that we're doing. So a good balance between digital learning, but also understanding how to serve people from just a research and understanding point of view, and finding different techniques becomes important from an upskilling. So so I think digital is changing a lot. You'll never learn everything. Upskilling and reskilling is always important, but it's the mindset that I'm really trying to focus on here than the specifics.
Yeah, but you know, Bagani, thank you so much for your thoughts. Really appreciate it. And I'm just thinking of something quick here. Sydney, how do you keep a brand people oriented? Because I think Bagani has just said something interesting, which I want to tap into your experience, because you've been in services for a long time, and you know it's an interesting field there. How do you keep a brand constantly in its marketing efforts focused on people, rather than getting excited by new technologies, putting out all sorts of crazy nice ads and all sorts of robotics and using AI and all sorts of exciting things that might sound exciting, but ultimately does not do anything for the consumer? How do you keep a brand, you know, like yourselves at Sanlam? How do you keep a brand on the people rather than anything else?
Look, I mean, it's important to always have a very high level of customer intimacy, understanding your customers, and defining really what is the brand purpose. Why do we exist here? You know, it's an existential question. Why do we exist as a business? Why are we here? What difference are we making to people that we serve? And define it succinctly, and ensure that you build the tenets of that in everything that you do, right? And you've got to have processes that enable you internally to be able to do that. Because, you know, I sit in our business probably with a team of just I don't know, close to 100 people in marketing across the different business units of Sanlam. They are interacting with different agencies at any one point, yet they are all representing one brand. So their understanding of what it stands for is extremely important. What is the brand essence? And how do you articulate the brand essence so that wherever you are and you're interacting with anybody else, or you are approving a piece of work, whether it's an ad or you're doing a presentation, that you are able to espouse the true attributes of what the brand represents. That's a process you've got to manage. You've got to manage internally, not just with, you know, internal staff, with agencies. A constant engagement to be able to just to ensure that every piece of work or communication that you churn out has, you know, some sort of signature in terms of style, tone, language, because, you know, people interact with brands in the same way they interact with people. You don't quite deal well with people who are schizophrenic, right? Or you don't create a very strong bond with someone who's schizophrenic, who's different every time you interact with them. Likewise, you want a brand to always show up in a way that's consistent. And it's all about managing. And I saw one question on the chat where someone was asking a question between, what is advertising or what is the difference between advertising and marketing?
Advertising and marketing, yeah.
Well, we are talking of things that are sitting on two derivatives. One is a strategic process. The other is a tactic. And in the strategic process, part of it is defining what the brand is. What is the nomenclature? What is the naming convention? At BMW, they don't release a BMW Aquas. They will release a 2 Series or a 7 Series or a 5 Series. So there's a nomenclature. There's a way of doing things at BMW that ensures that every time they show up, there's consistency and there's logic in how they show up. That's just like a minor example. But advertising is really a tactic, because I may decide to do sponsorships, which is not advertising, but both advertising and sponsorships are part of my broad marketing plan.
Yeah. So you've got a campaign with Jose Mourinho right now. I don't know if it's because you're a Chelsea fan or a Man U fan, Sydney. You're going to have to put your masks up. Going to clarify this one. You've got a campaign currently running with Jose Mourinho. Would that be advertising or sitting on your marketing rather? If you explain to that person that is asking that process, and of course, how would you measure your return for such kind of a campaign that you're currently running on confidence with Jose Mourinho?
Look, Jose is featuring in our ad, right? So he is an artist in an ad. It could have been you, it could have been anyone. But we thought Jose represents the ethos of our new brand, which is live with confidence. It's about inspiring people to achieve their dreams and aspirations. And confidence, you know what it's like when you go to an interview and you've got confidence. Yeah. Likewise, if you extrapolate that to ordinary life, we want people to have confidence to say, no matter how difficult things are, financially and otherwise, or no matter how rosy things are today, I can live with confidence because I've got a partner like Sanlam that can help me ensure that I achieve my dreams and aspirations. There's no one better than Jose Mourinho. There's no one better than Jose Mourinho to really demonstrate.
I could have given you that you could have got the same results and better results with Jürgen Klopp, but I'll hold you to that one for a moment. Sid, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you so you can see where my colors are more moving on the red side of life. Dr. Dlamini, let's bring you in to the question here. Are business schools teaching these changes that we're talking about? We're talking cloud computing, robotic process automation, the Internet of Things, big data. If I walked into a class right now in academia at a business school somewhere, am I going to find that we're learning these things in the classroom? And are we as business schools teaching things that are relevant for the digital age?
That's a very important and interesting question, right? I think fundamentally, business school function on the premise that we teach people skills, and the fundamental skill is problem solving, right? That's the fundamental skill that we need to be teaching. And Sydney touched on the importance of understanding what the business goals are about, right? So we understand that business insight becomes an important thing for decision making, because what we're saying now with this discussion is that we can no longer have people making decisions without evidence, right? So we understand that big data is probably the buzzword at the moment. There is reasonable doubt that big data also comes with overwhelming information, right? Because information is coming from different points. And now for marketers, the issue now becomes, how do you use that information to also solve problems and to make decisions? Which is an important thing about the way in which we teach at business school, that are you able to gather information for one, right? But it speaks to how Bakani also mentioned earlier when you asked the question about what skills are needed for the future. And part of it is the analytical thinking, right? And also in the thinking is about, do you understand the methodological rigor of data? Can you make sense of the data? Because it's not about the numbers. The numbers must tell a story. And at business school, we teach you what the importance of analysis, which informs insight. So the analysis has implications for the bottom line, which is profitability, which becomes an important thing for what we teach at a business school level. So the importance here is that we want people to think about decision making as the core of what business schools are all about. And in our thinking about decision making, you also function in a space where, as marketers, we think strategically as our core function, because we're not thinking just tactics, right?
All right, I seem to have lost Dr. Dlamini there. I don't know if others can hear
I'm
you,
back, so
we lost you're back.
Someone muted me.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are the key things. So the key things about the problem solving, understanding strategy and also making decisions, which is an important thing. But importantly also it's about the leading, right? Because at a business school, you are talking to future business leaders. So it's important that you're able to lead and communicate effectively in a boardroom so that it makes sense in terms of what value are you bringing in the boardroom and do people understand what is actually happening. And I think Dr. Sayini will touch more on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, can I just come in?
Yes.
Sort of representing this side of the fence in terms of the kind of people really that we want to see coming into the marketing environment, or people who are leading brands or marketing managers, or who are really aspire to become senior in these environments. I'll use myself as an example. I know I look 25, but when I cut my teeth in marketing, there was no digital marketing, right?
Yeah.
And here am I leading, an organization as a CMO, over 45 countries, and people look up to me to lead, right, and demonstrate that I understand, some of the opportunities and dynamics that affect our business on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. One
skill that I think business schools need to think about quite clearly, because a lot of the other things are verticals that are quite easy to identify. Can we teach people about content and social marketing? Great. Can we teach people about search engines? Yes. Conversion management? Yes. We can identify those, and you can actually develop content for things like that. What we need in this ever-changing world are skills, is a skill, and I'm going to just frame it, how to adopt a habit of continuous learning. Because, what you may have learned when you did your degree, may not necessarily be pervasive when you are leading a brand or leading a marketing team. What it calls for is for you to be adaptable, to be curious, to be learning all the time, to be opening yourself up to saying, what are the new skills that I need to learn? But that idea, that habit of continuous learning, is something extremely important, and I can't overemphasize it.
Absolutely, Sydney, great insights. I absolutely agree with you that the concept of continual learning is so important, and hence that's why we have executive education, especially in business schools, so that you can constantly be, finding new courses, and don't say I've got a marketing degree and 6 years later you think that marketing degree is all you need to take you forward. So it'll be very important that people continue to learn. Dr. Sayini, are we teaching the right things? Perhaps I want to come to you. Are we teaching the right things? You're the director, the program director for the Master of Management in Strategic Marketing at Wits Business School, a two-year program. And after those 2 great years of rigorous learning, doing research, going through all those 5-6 modules, are we coming out and getting people out that have the right output and are able to provide returns for their companies, perhaps?
Okay, thank you for that question. What I would say is that yes, we do offer the skills, and what I like what Mr. Mbele said, the issue about continuous learning. So when you come to study, what you are taught mainly is to help you to have an analytical mind, that you are able to analyze situations and also be able to analyze even the data. The program that we are running, we do offer a course in big data, that is an elective, but we offer a core course in marketing analytics. This is to help our students that when they leave, they are able to know how to analyze the data that is available. The other offer that we have is that when you look at digital marketing, and the digital technologies that are coming, there's a lot of things that we really don't understand how they work. So people can come in and say, I want to understand, for example, artificial intelligence, how it can work in a particular industry, maybe in the insurance industry. So students they can come up with their own research, and because the course is 50% coursework and 50% to do your own dissertation. So you can pick your own topic. As we can see with the digital marketing, there's a lot of areas that we really don't understand. For example, if you look at artificial intelligence, we're not sure how we can use this effectively in various industries. So those with an interest can come with that topic, and they can be able to do their own research. And of course, what I always say is that you can use that even as a leverage to improve your career growth. So we mainly give students skills, and the issue is that because of that, where we are sitting today, we're talking about Internet of Things, we're talking about big data, artificial intelligence. I don't know what we'll be talking about 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And the issue is that you need to be willing to learn all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Doc, appreciate it. And I'm sure that people will be looking forward to joining you for 2022's class. I know you've opened applications for next year's Master of Management in Strategic Marketing, which I'm sure will be invaluable, and you should be, getting people onto that class. But let's jump into something that's on my mind here. Bakani, maybe let me start with you. Co-creation and consumer activism. The ability for clients to help you co-create even your products and your services. But at the same time, we are seeing an increased activism on social media, for example. That means, social media and some of these platforms have become an enemy and also a demon sometimes, especially if you find your brand, under fire after tweeting that we must perhaps go looted Mercedes, and you apparently are a brand. Let's talk to that, this issue of co-creation and consumer activism.
Yeah. So I think in marketing fraternity right now, that's probably one of the things that a lot of marketers dread, to be frank. And if I look at it, I've had opportunities where we've, for good and for bad, really had experiences where you learn from these experiences. And there's a few things that I've observed really around the space. I think that ultimately, as marketing, as I mentioned earlier, we are a reflection of society. So if this is where our people are, it's our job to really understand how to engage them accordingly within that space. What I found, which I think Sydney also touched on, is that in order to drive co-creation, it's important that you look at, I think internally we look at three things. So in order to drive that performance, people and processes are really key. Let's talk about the people and processes aspect around co-creation and this aspect of consumer activism. I think why people is important is because I think we've heard the subject of diversity inclusion within businesses. And this is important not from a place of just really, affirmative action as a tick box, but also as a way to reflect and mirror society within your business. What that helps you to really understand internally is those areas where you may be antagonizing or losing your audience that you speak to because you've got the right people within your business. And I think it's important to recognize that we are also experiencing a generational shift, not just only outside of business, but within business where you've got different types of leadership. So it's important that you then have people who can reflect not only the outside, but also what people within the business can bring to the table in terms of really understanding this fine balance that we are trying to strike. The second I'll get into is the processes, which was touched on. Processes is very important because ultimately, you cannot just come off a hunch and put something out there, because clearly what you're seeing from consumers, they're expecting brands and marketers to do more and be better, especially with the amount of data exchange and value exchange that we're doing. So if we're talking about co-creation, they are giving us something, we are taking that, and we have to be responsible with it in how we then create our communication or how we engage with them after, because ultimately we have to deliver the value. And what we are seeing is that consumers are holding brands more accountable to this. So how you plan, how you co-develop is really key, and how you work with your agencies. And I think it's important to understand what processes as marketers do we need to outsource, and what processes need to be really closer to the core of what the brand needs to know and understand. And that brand essence is really important. That was highlighted early, in that ultimately it's about a personality and how you want to show up in the world. I found that, people only look at the bad side of consumer activism, but I've seen that if you're authentic in your approach and you have brought people along the journey, they actually meet you halfway, even if you get certain things wrong. Yeah. Where you get backlash is where you're not responsible with that. So I think those two things for me are quite important. Really, it's about people, processes, and how we manage that.
Absolutely. Sydney, your thoughts perhaps on this issue of co-creation and also increased consumer activism. You've got Jose Mourinho out there. I decide, of course, I'm a Liverpool fan. I don't like him, and I start spamming you because I feel like I'm a Sanlam customer. How dare you use Jose Mourinho? Why not use the next guy? Why not use a local coach? And I might feel like I'm justified. What are your thoughts on some of these things?
The beauty about that example that you've just used is that the advertising was not about Jose Mourinho, about Sandler. So staying true to who you are matters. Brands need to be authentic, and as a result, we haven't had a lot of negative comments or negative response on Jose Mourinho, despite the fact that actually he is a polarizing character. Because the message was on brand, was not about Jose Mourinho. We just used it as a hook. So I think this idea of brand purpose, Bakani is right. There's a positive side to democratization of, information and channels, where this user-created content can actually work to your favor if you apply yourself accordingly. Don't position yourself or your brand as something that you're not, because consumers will figure it out and they will roast you for it. So stay true to who you are, be authentic, and apply the science. And I want to repeat again, you got to apply the science. What is the insight? Why am I doing this? For what purpose? What is the message that I'm going to communicate out there? And what is it saying, et cetera, et cetera. You got to apply yourself. That would be my response.
Absolutely. Sydney, thank you so much for your thoughts. And to my panelists, thank
Lawrence,
you so much. Yes.
Or can I just add one more comment to that? Yes. Or a minute? Okay, I'll be very quick. I think the one aspect that maybe we'll touch on and that we can get onto is brands with purpose as well. I think developing an ethical and value-centered core within a brand is very important, and making sure that that is always dynamic is very important, and building an ongoing relationship. But yeah, we can go into it in detail, but those things are really key in terms of this ever-evolving, challenging space that we are dealing with that changes all the time.
Yeah, thanks so much to my guests for the insights. I really appreciate the depth now, but I want to move on to the question and answers, the question and answer section. I call this the 1 minute section. So in other words, let's try and keep our questions as short as possible, and our answers as short as possible also, but precisely answering our guests. Let me start from the first question. Justin Van Alphen, a great friend of mine. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin. He asked something earlier. What are your thoughts of Unilever's call to a hard stop on traditional marketing in South Africa? Bakani, you are a Unilever alumni, and Sydney, you are a Unilever alumni. I don't know if, I don't have my facts on this one, but what if you have any insights? I know it might be dangerous ground for you also. And I do know that they did say in 2020 that they'll stop marketing and advertising beverages to children under the age of 12 in traditional media. That's the last thing I read. I hope I'm not misreading what Justin wants to talk about. Perhaps that's what he is talking about. Thoughts on that?
Go.
1 minute, Sydney. You
Yeah.
he arrived at Unilever first, so we're going to allow him to say something first.
I think it's in relation to what's just happened in our country. If I hope I'm correct. Look, again, I mean, I would have to be exposed to the facts and data for me to be able to give an informed view, because I don't know what led them to it. I'm going to continue to advertise. And why am I going to advertise? Because I can use my advertising, even in dire circumstances, to change the narrative, to make people feel heard, to make people to have a sense of belonging, or to sympathize with them about what they're going through. So it's not only brands that can be purposeful, advertising can also be purposeful.
Absolutely. Sidi, thanks so much. Quick 1 minute, appreciate it. Dr. Saini, Peter asks, may I please get the panelists' view on the benefits of using a multi-language marketing and advertising approach? Would you want that approach? Multi-language, do you think it gets to people better? I saw Twitter training the other day when the president was speaking. Some people were crediting to the fact that he was speaking in multiple languages. And does it get to you better if something is spoken in your own language from an ad perspective?
Yeah, I think on the issue of using different languages, I think now with the technology, you can do that. You can be able to advertise in different languages and be able to tailor that. I think if you look at some of the adverts we look around, and for some of us, if let's say the brand is speaking to us in our own language, we feel at home. We feel to be part and parcel of that brand. So it depends. It's not a one size fits all. So it depends on the brand. It depends on the product that you are selling and also your customers. But you can do that. With technology, you can be able to have one advert and use different languages to different audiences.
So I could sell a Lamborghini in a Suzu. And it sounds good. Appreciate it. Dr. Dlamini, let's bring you into the conversation here. Bright says Dr. Saini brought in an important discussion about new technologies driven by AI. Reading some researchers, there seems to be mixed reactions on how these technologies are said to replace the relevance of our discipline. Just wanted to get the thoughts on the panel on how relevant our discipline is more likely to be with these changes.
Yeah, so it's an important question because also it speaks about our identity as marketers, right? So it's not necessarily threatening our value. If anything, it's helping us unlearn certain behavior, but also teaching us as marketers, right? Because the biggest issues that we find, we cannot function from arrogance, right? Because as marketers, we need to be teachable, but we don't know everything, right? So all these technologies that are coming through also comes with information because they always help us understand how do we better understand and better serve our customers, right? Because they come with information, and information also helps us predict the behavior and the patterns of consumers to better know what we do and how we serve those consumers. I think that's ultimately why AI is important in this context of enhancing what we do, not necessarily replacing the value of marketing.
Absolutely. Sydney, I've got Umpume. Umpume says, with digital acceleration happening so fast, what would your advice be in terms of studies and marketers as there is a change in the digital marketing landscape, a series of short courses as technology develops, or a full qualification perhaps? And I'm speaking to you as an industry person. I know if I throw it across the other side, we will put in a nice sales pitch on why they should come to our Master of Management program, of course. But you were sitting on the other side and obviously looking at an employee. Umpume comes and what will be your thoughts? What would be your advice to him as a sister?
Well, I mean, I think, I mentor a lot of people, and one of the first questions I ask is, where is this journey going? Because whatever decision you take on education should be based on, your aspiration, right? If you want to end up as a chief digital officer versus a chief marketing officer, there's two streams that you can take. I won't put you into the N3 to Durban. I'll put you into the N1 to Polokwane because you are very clear about where you're going. But my approach would always be, it is always great to have a base qualification, right? From a marketing perspective. It doesn't always have to be in marketing, but if you have a very pointed direction towards sort of moving into a digital marketing space, for example, of course, do sort of focus on that specific slither that's going to ensure that you consolidate the gains in that particular area. In my own educational background, I've got both. You know, I've got a qualification in marketing, but I've also got short courses that were meant to accentuate my skills, you know, in particular areas that are really relevant to my aspiration. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Senior, appreciate it. I'm sure there will be an appreciation for your answer. Dr. Saini earlier, Jason says, Dr. Saini earlier raised an interesting aspect on the digital divide. Can we then connect the slow diffusion of digital technology in South Africa's retail sector as emanating from market segmentation that is not customized digital technologies? Bakani, your thoughts on this issue of the digital divide? Can we then connect the slow division of digital technology in South Africa and the retail sector as emanating from the market segmentation that is not accustomed to digital technologies, perhaps? You know, why is 360 not available in Soweto, maybe, you know, and some of these things like that? Talk to us. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because this is a topic I myself am quite interested in at the moment. Look, there's no clear solutions yet, as we otherwise would have them so far. But I think definitely the availability of the right kind of technology is quite important, and people's access to that technology. I think quite earlier, Dr. Saini mentioned the number of people who have got certain types of devices versus other devices. And in South Africa, where they've got, even if you have a smartphone, then it's the access to data that becomes important as well. And I think that when we start looking at technologies that are connected to digital like that, such as fulfillment or delivery, that then needs to also be accompanied by other things such as safety, such as low costs, et cetera, that go with that. I think that right now we've got one aspect in that the technology has needed to get to a certain level, but also the cost of getting goods to people is another aspect that needs to be considered. So our infrastructure, our road networks, all the other things that how the digital and the physical world need to interact from a distribution channel point of view are really where the challenges are. So where you get, you know, your modern trade customers or your checkers and your pick and pays really adopting these technologies, they are in spaces where that cost to do that is lower. Where the cost becomes higher, then that's the challenge. So what do we need? I think what we really need is a different model to fulfillment in which still leverages the technology, but appreciates that the cost to getting people there is going to be slightly different. And why I talk about cost is that at the end of the day, it's based on how much is the customer going to buy that is going to allow us to have the right technology. In your big stores, et cetera, I think you can see that we can do that by having people buy bigger baskets. But in places where people are buying smaller baskets, what is a much more cost-effective solution?
Well spoken from an FMCG man, Tiger Brands, Senior Marketing Manager, Bakani Ntaisi there. Thank you so much for your insights, really appreciate it. Dr. Saini, let's bring you in on this question. To what extent has literature on return on marketing investment been developed within the academic space? Utofam Timba asks, this issue of returns on metrics, are we seeing it coming out in the academic space, and have we done enough to be able to articulate clearly as marketers this return on investment plans?
Yeah, in terms of literature, there is a lot, especially when you look at the use of the digital technologies. Because if, let's say, you take a lot, just as an example, you can tell who is buying from you, how much you are spending, because everything is, you've got the information on what you are selling and how much customers are paying. So in terms of literature that is available, I think maybe we might have issues on how we can be able to apply this in our different work environments. Maybe that's where we might have issues. But in terms of literature, that is available. And how you can calculate all this, yes.
Great to hear. So someone should be tapping onto Google Scholar and trying to see what's there. I'm going to throw this one at Sydney. Sydney, Jonan says, as a PR professional, I would like to hear the views of the panel, especially those in the corporate space, on how the two functions can build better synergies and drive revenue for the business. PR professionals, of course, us marketing people, you know, we are always told we do t-shirts and we do posters, and PR people often apparently love hanging out with celebrities and influencers. How can we find a synergy between the t-shirts and the influencers, perhaps? perceived bleaching?
I made a point earlier on about the strategy, the difference between strategy and tactics, and I used advertising as an example. I said advertising is a tactic, marketing is the broader strategy, which seeks to orchestrate the building of the brand and meeting the customer in their reality. I would see PR alongside that. So in my team, the head of PR for our group sits within the marketing space, right?
Yeah.
So when I brief with the agencies, they're sitting in the room because they are a lever alongside sponsorships, alongside advertising, alongside all other levers that we have to be able to transmit, our brand messages out there. So they don't sit outside of, of kind of the broader ecosystem, because you've got to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Straight to the point, Sydney. There's a partnership that needs to happen because you're all part of the same ecosystem. Appreciate it. Ubongiwe Njulula, Ubongiwe says, it may seem like everyone knows how to be marketers lately. This is something I know I made a comment on Twitter. Why? Because of influencer marketing. Influencer marketing themselves, products on social media. We see young teens booming on TikTok. Is the marketing profession losing its worth, or is it worth it to study marketing further? Dr. Dlamini, now influencer, influencer, content creator. It looks like what you have taken a good 6-7 years to study, someone else just needs to change the title on Twitter and says they are a marketer by definition. Is this creating a loss of value for marketing? I think that's what Ubongi were really trying to understand. Does this therefore create a loss of some sort of value? You have 2 minutes to talk on this one. You have 1 minute to talk on this one, and because I know, I can tell you now, we are probably thinking of doing something along the lines of a talk around this issue of influencer marketing, because I know in people's eyes, the question is it working? Is it worth working? Is there authenticity in a product if someone is just paid to advertise it and they probably have never even used it themselves? So influencers, do you think the trend or the new issue of influencers is making marketing valueless?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and controversial question in a sense, right? Because you think now in the context in which we find ourselves that people also assume that they can be marketers by virtue of having social media platforms, right? So people think to themselves that they are marketers, right? So it becomes challenging to us now. You have to justify your value and your worth when you're coming with the background of having qualifications and having experience, which fundamentally also goes to understanding the context in which influencers function from and what value they bring to the table, right? Because it's good and well that they are offering organizations a channel to engage and interact with customers, but the important thing is that who are they interacting with, and does that translate into profitability for the organization? Because that's the key function, is to also drive that engagement and build some awareness or lead to some interaction with consumers. But it doesn't take away from the strategy that sits behind influencer marketing, which is how we as marketers have defined ourselves in terms of how we've upskilled ourselves with our qualifications and the skills that we have in understanding what is marketing and what isn't marketing. So influencer marketing is enhancing where we are, and it's helping organizations better understand what consumers are doing out there and what they're talking and saying about our brands, which is an important thing.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Superior. We'll have an extended conversation, ladies and gentlemen, on influencer marketing at some point. I'm confident we're hoping to touch it at some point in one of our talks in the industry. Basil Mkize, thank you so much for joining us, Basil. Much appreciated. Basil has an interesting question. Bakani, I'm going to throw this at you. At what point do you irritate customers on when you keep telling them about Tiger Brands as condiments, and you got so many of them, and you keep throwing it in their faces in one way? At what point does a customer switch off normally? And what's the difference between engaging a customer consistently and the difference with us bombarding a customer essentially on something? Because some brands do look like they actually bombard us rather than inform us.
Well, first and foremost, on my side, I don't have all that money to keep bombarding people. So my money runs out. So that's not the case per se. But I think that a lot of it has to do with the science that we keep talking about upfront in terms of really understanding who you're speaking to. So one of the exercises that we really do quite consistently is really understanding what informs the thoughts and the feelings and the actions of the person you're speaking to today, and where would you like to move them to, or at least get them to? And with that, you get an appreciation of the triggers and the barriers. If you're very clear on those things, your KPIs will ensure that you are not getting into the point of irritation, because you've done the work to really understand that this is something that is either going to encourage them to move down the funnel or discourage them from moving down the funnel. So that's really, really key. I think also having the right kind of partners from a measurement point of view allows you to really understand effectiveness. And I think this is where digital has really been quite instrumental in terms of understanding how can we quantify sentiment. And that was something that was not possible in the past, but this is something we can do much, 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 much more reliably with digital.
Absolutely, absolutely appreciate your thoughts. Zinhle is going to throw this one. I think, Sydney, it's going to come to you because you're a former financial services man. In light of the current context, what would you say are the three key elements to focus on to reinforce brand resonance, particularly in the financial services? Issue of brand resonance. Just three key elements you would focus on to reinforce brand resonance, particularly in financial services, perhaps.
We are, and we've seen it over the last few days with all that's been happening in the country and what's been happening actually on the rest of the continent over the last few, a number of years. We are swimming in a world of economic turbulence. So firstly, I would want to make sure that the idea of financial inclusion is included in how I project my brand. That's number one, because we've got more people participating in the mainstream economy. Secondly, I want people to feel a sense that their financial aspects are protected, or the little they have can be grown. That's financial security. So financial inclusion, financial security. And then lastly, I would wrap that up with building trust using my brand purpose, because you want people to know that I can do this better than Old Mutual, better than Discovery, better than anybody else. Yeah.
Straight Consults. I'm sure that's straight out of the Sanlam textbook and strategy there, and I'm sure you can apply it to the rest of the financial services industry. But I get what Sydney, great insights from you. I appreciate it. Evans brings a very important question here. Dr. Saini, I'll throw this one at you. How can marketers use digital marketing platforms to shape the image of brand South Africa in such a time of distress, given the current violence of the country? The brand is definitely dented, ain't it? And how can we use digital marketing perhaps to change perceptions in Africa or the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. I hope it wouldn't be given to me.
I put you on the spot on this one, Doc, because I know you're not the biggest political animal in the world, because this one mixes both two things. But how would we leverage, perhaps? The question is, how would we leverage, perhaps, on the digital platforms here to perhaps change perceptions that we are not looters and violent people, perhaps, as perceived?
Yeah, this one is quite difficult, because you see the problem with the current digital technologies, information is moving very fast. These images are all over the world, and people, their perception about South Africa is actually changing. And how you can change this has to be, there has to be some political backing. You can't just do it on your own. As let's say a brand on your own. This is quite complex. I think let me give it to Mr. Mbele. You can help me on this one.
Mr. Mbele, Brand South Africa, you are the new CEO. What's the plan? We've been looting, and we can't pretend we've not been looting. What's the plan, Mr. Mbele?
Yeah, it's a tough one for this country, but like anything else, not insurmountable. I think there's lots that generally we get a rep for in this country, purely just because we are not assertive and confident about our brand, and I think a myth busting exercise. When you watch the US elections, they always have this fact check. Something. I think a myth busting exercise would need to be done, because a lot of people I've spoken to who are overseas, they think the whole country is burning, yet it's happening in hotspots in Gauteng and it's happening in KZN. So I'm using that as a simple example, that there's a lot going for us that we could talk about. And I think understanding the impediments of why people would not come to South Africa, you know, and really dealing with those directly would be important. Understanding those impediments, and then offering solutions that seek to actually circumvent those challenges. Let me give you a simple example. You know, with the Kruger National Park in Mpumalanga, you can land a 737, but we don't land 737s there. So you could fly, for people who want to go to the bush, you could fly them from Frankfurt directly to the Kruger National Park. They don't have to stop in Johannesburg. And they don't have to stop, wait 3 hours, connect a flight, land at Kruger, and then go to the bush. So they can fly straight, you know, to the Kruger without worries. You could offer customs before people board a plane in Dubai. It doesn't need to happen here. The US do it all the time. You know, in Canada, you do your customs before you get onto a plane, you know, if you're going to the US, to try and deal with issues of efficiency. You know, so there's, I think there are solutions, but we are just not assertive and confident, you know, and packaging our story in a manner that really focuses on the issues that matter.
Absolutely. Dr. Dlamini, Brand South Africa CEO, you are the new Brand South Africa CEO. This one is an interesting question. We have had all this bad PR for the past week and more. What would you do, and how would you leverage it on your marketing skills to perhaps bring a better perception of what we're doing? Would we put an influencer? Would we bring Trevor Noah? Because you know, I saw Usbongile say an influencer can be thought of as a channel for the marketer to get the target audience of choice. Do we bring Trevor Noah and say, look, we'll put people out there and put you out like Simba, and just say, look, guys, we're good people. Look at Trevor Noah, look at his smile, and get things across. You know, Damien Gamer said the modern influencer is equivalent to a sales rep. They know their channels, their end user audience, and leveraging their popularity. What would we work on? Charlize Theron, time to bring Charlize and tell people that we're good people. Dr. Dlamini.
So this is also very interesting. So I want to touch on it from two perspectives. So Sydney touched on important insights about information, right? Because there's misinformation in chaos, right? So you need to also bring credibility of accurate information, especially in such circumstances. But I think the beauty about marketing is that we are at heart storytellers, right? So we need to be also using the nature of storytelling, which sometimes come with the good and the bad, to also showcase and illustrate the good that's happening in our country, to tell a better story. And I think ultimately that's what is going to resonate with people in understanding there is good in the chaos, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. You know, I wish I could take all your questions, but for today, it looks like I'm running out of space for those questions. But I like the quote that Damien Gamer sent me. He says, speak to a man in your language, and it will go through his head. Speak to him in his language, then it goes to his heart. That answers one of the questions that I think that was asked in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, this talk has been brought to you by Wits Business School's MMSM program, as it's popularly called, the Marketing Strategic Marketing Program, which is a 2-year program that we offer at the business school, which I'm sure will change your life for those of you that have not done it, and will be part of your continual learning offering that will be there. For those of you that want to get more information on that program, by the way, on the 3rd of August, there's an information session that is running. On the 3rd of August, there's an information session that will be running. I believe that it will be in the evening, and you can join us then. It's Tuesday, the 3rd of August at 5 o'clock. You can always email, begimfundo.matandela@wits.ac.za. It's going to be online also. So that we're not talking about all these AI and all these things. There's a place where we can demystify and we can make these things easier in that academic programs. My guests for this evening, your last thoughts before we close and before we say goodbye to our wonderful guests that have been here. We appreciate them taking their time, all 100 of you that came through this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. But I'm going to give the last remarks to our guests at this point in time. Bakani, your final remarks and what you think absolutely for today, marketing the digital age, you think one must be able to remember?
Yeah, I think the final thought would be, whilst I believe that it's important that we catch up with the rest of the world and where the world is in terms of digital, it's important that we carve out our own, and I love the 4 I's that you talked about earlier, Doctor, but it's important that we carve out our own identity and our own place with how we use these tools. So I think what we're really looking for, and I know that in our space, is about marketers that have got new and very interesting ways to approach existing problems. And these do not have to only talk about what the brands are trying to solve for. Even looking at how we can solve society's problems as we do so is the kind of creativity and the kind of caliber of marketer that we're looking for, and digital can only be a tool to help us do so.
Absolutely. Dr. Dlamini, your final thoughts, sir?
Thank you very much, Lawrence. I think the key thing is that, traditional marketing is not dead. Let's get that out of the way. I think what digital is helping us do is helping us enhance our skills and capabilities. And I think it's important as marketers moving forward that we also upskill and gather the knowledge that we need to also become more effective in what we do in the business of marketing. And it doesn't take away from the fact that, the key things are that consumers are going to be dominant for the longest time. They're going to be at the center of strategy and the center of what we do. And I think it's also important that we also take insights, very importantly as marketers, because marketing research is becoming key now in terms of decision making and ensuring that we become more effective in what we do, because ultimately we're driving towards marketing effectiveness, which is what we should be striving for. Thank you, Lawrence.
Dr. Saini, thank you so much for your hosting us and for your program to hosting us this afternoon. Your final thoughts, sir?
I just wanted to say that traditional marketing will still be there, and also digital, but we also need to understand that consumers, they still need to feel that the brand is being empathetic to them, that the brand understands them. So even though as we're using the new technologies cannot take the part of the human way of dealing with customers, and also the human way of thinking and analyzing, that will still be there. So we still need to be empathetic to our customers. We still need our digital skills, but also need to have that strategic thinking as to where we are going as a brand and what you really want to achieve. Even personally, where do you want to go and what do you want to achieve? So the human part is still there. It's very important.
Absolutely. Clear message, Doc. The human part is still there. It still remains the same. Sidi Mbele, your final thoughts as we close out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best marketing, doesn't feel like marketing. The modern digital marketer needs to find ways where marketing is a natural conversation, not an intrusion.
Yeah. Thanks so much. My name is Lawrence Dube. I'm the Executive Corporate Business Manager at Wits Business School. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I pray that and I hope that you have got some powerful insights to make and change your own brands, to change your own company, to change the organizations that you're leading in marketing. If you have anything that you would love us to discuss at some point, if you've got anything that you would love us to discuss at some point, please do email tembega@wits.ac.za for any topics. Tembega, you can just put your in the chat box. You can just put your email address there, and then we'll be able to tackle your topic. We're going to have more of these conversations. We're looking forward to having another 2 or 3 conversations of this nature around the marketing space, because we've, on all honesty, not been neglected in some of these issues, and we hope that we can take more time to understand these marketing issues. The timing is exactly 5:30. We don't want to go any more than the time that you've gave us, and we want to make sure that the next time you're here, you know that we will take your time considerably seriously. Thank you so much to my guests once again. It's been a great pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time. From UCT, Dr. Simphiwe Dlamini. From Sanlam, Mr. Mbele, thank you so much. Sidi Mbele, thank you so much. Mr. Bakani Ntaisi from Tiger Brands, and of course our host, Dr. Yvonne Saini. It's been a great evening. Have yourself a lovely evening. Be safe, sanitize, safe distance, and just take time to reflect. And for those that do pray, take time to also pray for the nation in such trying times. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank